Welcome to my podcast, From Divorce to Divinely Designed. I am your host, Michelle Wright, a spiritual mentor and guide for women navigating the full arc of rebuilding a life after divorce. Whether you're in the middle of the hardest chapter, opening your heart to love again, or rebuilding a blended family, you are in the right place. In this podcast, we explore how this is not happening to you, but how it is happening for you. Let's begin. Welcome to the podcast From Divorce to Divinely Designed. I'm Michelle Wright, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Today we have a returning guest, Sharlene from Down Under in Australia. And she's going to be talking to us a little bit about Moonology and her insights and intuition and downloads for us in that. And as we were talking, as good friends do, we were sharing our stories of divorce. And it was so important to us to share her story. She too has a story. And our hope is that as we share different stories from our past, you know that you're not alone. You can see the light of hope and find a way forward. So welcome, Sharlene, to the podcast.
Hi, Michelle. How you going? Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, too. And for you, it's the next day, is it not? In the morning. For me, it's evening.
That's right. For you, it's at Friday evening. For me, it's Saturday morning at the bottom of the world down here in Australia. So cool. It's cool weather for me, and I think hot weather for you.
Yes, we're in the throes of summer, and you're in fall and winter, are you not?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's quite cool. It's actually raining here today, but that's fine.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad that you're here, Sharlene. And we started this journey. Oh, I think it's going on 10 years now, isn't it? I think it's something like it is many years. And we met, and there were three of us, and our other beautiful soul sister is with us in spirit. And it started actually with a breakup and cards. So we joined Colette Baron Reed's personal mastery course, learning how to read oracle cards. And from there, she put us into a group to work together. And 10 years later, here we are.
Exactly. Yeah, what a story. Who would have thought? Yeah. And you're right. You know, the reason I ended up in that course with you was after a breakup. So I'd been with a guy, mind you, I've never been married. But I've had two quite long-term relationships, and I have a child with one of the guys who's now 19, my son, Stephen. But yeah, it was because of a breakup that I actually was just sitting in front of my computer thinking, I need to get myself out of this. Like, I need to find a way to build myself back up again. I was shattered, after having two long-term relationships sort of peter out, and you start to think, well, I'm not worthy. Why doesn't, as I said, never been married. Why doesn't anyone want to marry me? See all the people around me getting married. But to be honest, Rodney did ask me to marry him when I got pregnant, and I said no, because I just felt like it was the only reason he wanted to get married was because we're having a baby. And I wasn't that confident in our relationship that, I wanted to commit to him for that amount of time. So yeah, after the second one, I was dumped by text after the second one, which was pretty ordinary. Been with the guy for about 9 years, and I just got a text message one day to say I'm done, and that was it. We'd broken up before, and I'd always gone after him and, sorted things out, and we got back together. But this time all I wrote back was okay, and that was the end of it. Like, I just left it at that. But yeah, I was just looking for personal development, I think, and I came across the course, and the personal mastery really made me think, well, that's something I can actually do I can learn to read cards, and I can learn to sort of help myself. And that's what I wanted to do, more than just have someone talking at me all the time. I really wanted to figure out the strategies and the ways to do that. And the oracle cards just, to me, seemed like a fantastic way to do that. And it was. I think the things we learnt in that course really turned my life around.
When you think of your relationships, I'm just thinking of the two, your first one with Rodney and the second one with Darren. And I think of women that could benefit from your story because one, you had the young baby at that point. You
Yep.
actually had the young baby and you knew it was time. You must have been so scared because we talk about things changing. Your house needs to change, your finances change, your community changes. What was that like for you the first time?
Yeah, it was yeah, so I'd been with Rodney for about 15 years, I think. So from a quite young age, and we'd had a pretty good relationship. We'd travelled a fair bit, not overseas, but just in Australia. We like to go on camping trips and long drives and things like that. And when I look back at it now, I think I didn't realise that he was a little bit controlling at the time. Like, he eventually stopped me from playing sport. I used to play hockey every weekend, and eventually that was just too much trouble. Oh, but I'd rather go camping, or I want us to do this, or I want us to do that. And then my friends sort of slowly disappeared as well because, it was always, oh no, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We lived in a beautiful little country house out in the bush, and we would spend our time out there, and we had cats and collecting firewood and things. And it wasn't too bad, but it wasn't until I look back and I see the signs now that he sort of pulled me away from my family, my friends and my sport and things like that. So that was interesting to notice when I went back. But I think it got more and more controlling. And then when we split up the first time, he just basically kicked me out of the house one night. So his mother, who had actually never liked me, so that was another thing, but she lived up north in Queensland. She was down staying at the time. She'd come down for a holiday. And yeah, I come home from work one night and he just fronted me and said, I think you're having an affair with your boss and I think, I want to break up. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like I wasn't having an affair with my boss. I did actually have an affair with him after I broke up, but I was free then, so that was fine. But yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, so I left. I just left that night. He said, you don't have to leave tonight, but, we'll work it out. And I'm like, yeah, F you, mate. I'm out of here. Like I was crying and carrying on. I was throwing stuff in my car and then I was just really mad and I just drove out and went to, I think, my brother's house at the time, and that was it. I never went back. Look, the breakup was actually quite good. He was very friendly about it. He gave me money straight away. He actually came with me to help me buy all the furniture for my flat. He helped me set the flat up. Like it was really bizarre. I think he felt guilty, so he did everything he could to help me. And we were apart for probably nearly 2 years, I think. And then he sort of came knocking back on the door one day and said, oh, I think I've made a mistake and I accused you wrongly. And I think his mother had a bit to do with that. And so we sort of, got back together a little bit, I guess. And we were, hanging out and seeing some friends that I had made since then. And then the next thing I knew, I was pregnant. So at 41, and I was like, oh, now what am I going to do? And when I told him, he just thought it was fantastic and he cried and he was like, oh, I thought I was going to lose you forever. I'm so excited, blah, blah, blah. So that was it. Sold my house, moved back in with him. And then he started treating me like crap. Like it was quite bad, calling me fat, not helping me do anything, just going off motorbike riding on the weekends and stuff like that. And I was like, he did actually ask me to marry him at that stage. And I said no, because I think we'd actually been engaged for 15 years, but we never got married. I couldn't live in that house with him and keep my sanity. Like I just knew I had to move out. And so I did. I started making plans on my own, finding rental properties, things like that. I had some money. I looked into, what I could get on family benefits and stuff like that. Spoke to a previous boss and I, offered to give me some work that I could do at home a couple of days a week. So I had that little bit of income and I just thought, you know what, this is going to be tough, but I'm just doing it. So I did. And I just went out to him one day and he was sitting out the back, which he used to always do. And I said, look, I think I'm going to leave. Now, in between, we had been to counselling. We'd had many conversations. This was over a period of about 6 months. So I didn't make the decision straight away. I tried all these other avenues. And in the end, I just said, look, I'm going to leave. Like I've made the decision that I'm going to move out. And the first thing he turned around and said to me was, I want a DNA test for the child. And I'm like, go your hardest. If that's all he was worried about was the kid actually his. And they were the spitting image of each other. So it was obvious that he was. But anyway, he did get the DNA test later on. He did it himself, I think, ordered the kit and he did it himself, and then, yeah, it wasn't till months later, I said to him, "Oh, did you ever do the DNA test?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what was the outcome?" And I thought, well, it must have been his because he would have let me know if it wasn't. And of course it was his child. I knew it was anyway. But yeah, he didn't stop me. He didn't ask me not to go. And that's the thing that, when I've spoken to my son about what happened, he never once said to me, I don't want you to go. Like, please stay. There was nothing. So I went. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. I cried. I've cried so much because I'd just broken up the only family. Well, I had my own family, but I'd broken up my own family. And you're looking at my mum and, my mum had four kids to four different dads. And I'm like, oh, I'm just the bloody same. I haven't learnt anything. Yeah, it was terrible. But I knew that I was in a much better place on my own. And that was the main thing that I just clung on to, that little 1%. You're going to feel better. And I did feel better. The weight was off my shoulders. And we actually started a brand new relationship then as friends. And he was at my house all the time, helping out with the baby and feeding and bathing and putting him to bed. And we actually had a really good relationship then, which was really strange. But I think he felt a lot of guilt. Even now, I think he feels a lot of guilt about it.
That story is quite amazing. And the reason why I see it amazing, similar to myself, I see threads to
Mm.
childhood trauma, childhood experiences that bring you to some of the partners you choose.
Yeah,
And then there's an awakening, a realization of you don't want to live in that. You don't want to
yeah,
be in that relationship anymore. It's not the best for your own heart, your own soul. And similar to me, it was an easier decision when I had my boys
yeah,
because I recognized the life that I wanted to create for them. And so, what I wasn't always able to choose for myself, I was more easily able to choose
yeah,
for children, even though it did break up the family.
yeah.
And for women who listen to this, my goal is always that they can find community, they find a way through and support. What did you find help you at that time?
I think at that time it was, getting back to work. So
Okay.
just finding my tribe through work again. So I started off doing work from home. I was writing training manuals and stuff like that. And then as my son got older and I was able to, put him into daycare maybe one day a week, and I wanted him to be a social kid as well. So I knew that if I kept him at home all the time and it was just him and I, that it wasn't healthy for him either. That he needed to learn to socialise with other kids and stuff like that. We started off slowly. It was one day a week he would go to daycare, and then it might have been 2 days a week, and then I think I started him off in 4-year-old kinder, and that was, a couple of half days a week. And it just gave me the freedom to get dressed, like get up, have a shower, put my work clothes on, do my makeup, drop him off at kinder, and then go and, work in the office for half a day or whatever. And look, I was lucky that I could find, those bits and pieces of work that I could do that was still valuable that got me out of the house. But I think that was the main thing, was sort of getting back into work life. And then I got into working with a guy to build a business. So he was an electrical contractor and he was starting a new business. And I came on board. I knew him through friends, came on board to be his business manager. And I've been there 15 years now, and I just bought the company a couple of years ago. So that kind of worked out all right. But I think, yeah, just getting back to work and getting out and finding a tribe and people to relate to, like even my hockey friends that I hadn't seen for a while. I went back and sort of played a couple of games of hockey. I was a bit old for it then, but, it was still good to be able to go and play a couple of games of hockey and catch up with the girls. We went out for dinner. I think it was just that reaching out that, it wasn't that relationship where I've got into Oracle cards. It was after Darren. But yeah, finding a tribe, I think, was the main thing. Just getting out of the house and communicating with people.
Yes. Community really makes a difference, and networking. I found a similar thing for myself. And what is wonderful is I've found now, in a different part of my life, you can see a community online. That's how we met each other.
Yeah, exactly.
He
Yeah.
is also powerful. I actually flew all the way down there with my husband.
Yeah, that's right.
And so
So and
it's
so.
like this really closeness that you can create in online communities. And it's that encouragement that if you can't find it within your work or in your space, find an online community that can help you can connect with, and it's through hobbies, through work, through what you enjoy. So that would be another way that you could help women. Yes, I agree with that. And now the next relationship you had, like you had said, was 9 years. And this is
Yep.
now where you were before that were not spiritual. So then after the end of the ninth year, when you started, whatever brought you to Oracle cards? It's personal development.
Yeah, just personal development I think I was looking for. So, yeah, the next relationship I actually was a guy I actually went to school with, and we met online through Facebook. He sent me a message and he said, "Oh, I think we went to school together." And when I saw the message, sorry, my cat's getting in the way. When I saw the message, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember you. I think I've got you in a photo." And so I went and scrounged through the cupboard and found this photo from school. We were all at a camp, and there was I in the front of the photo, and he was actually standing right behind me. And yeah, it was funny. So I sent him a copy of the photo, and yeah, I was living on my own at the time, obviously, with Stephen. He was only quite young, and so we decided to go out for dinner. I think I got my mum to babysit, and that was it. He sort of just kept coming around, and I didn't introduce him to Stephen. I think I want to say it was probably about 2 years. I think that we had been chatting and sort of going out. When Stephen was either at his dad's or was with mum or whatever, that we would go out. And yeah, it took me quite a long time to actually introduce my son to Darren. Again, it was the lack of confidence in the relationship. Do I really want to bring this guy into my life or into Stephen's life more importantly? And so, yeah, eventually I did introduce him. And a couple of years after that, we had an incident where I discovered that he was actually an alcoholic, which he had kept quite secret from me for a while. But then, yeah, once I found out about it, there was a lot more issues. He ended up losing his license for drink driving. And, I just found that I sort of became the one that was looking after him all the time. And I know you and I used to talk about that relationship quite a lot. And look, I stuck with it for a long time. It was, looking after the wounded bird, I guess. He had so many issues. I kept him from losing his job when he lost his license. I drove him all around the place. We had organised a big trip. We were going to the Big Red Bash, which is a big concert here in Australia, and it's in the middle of Australia. It's a long drive, and he had lost his license, so I ended up having to do all the driving for that trip, and he was drinking on the way. And anyway, but for some reason, I'd stuck it out. Although I think I must have been mentally withdrawing from the relationship towards the end. I think I just got worn out with everything that was going on, and my focus was really my work. I hadn't bought the business by then, but that was really my focus. And yeah, I think I just mentally withdrew a little bit, and I guess he probably felt that. I think I remember him making a comment to me saying, "Oh, you never come to my house anymore." And I'm like, "Well, you kind of don't." The last few times I've been there, he had actually stopped me in the doorway because he would have had alcohol out, or, there'd be bottles of wine or port or whatever. And I had actually been into his house when he wasn't there and seen how many was there. And, it was ridiculous, the amount of stuff he was drinking. And so I think he was embarrassed and ashamed of that as well, even though he knew that I knew that he drank. We'd had a few confrontations over it. Yeah, and I think that was, I don't know how we come to the decision where just that one time, and like I said, we'd broken up a couple of times, and I'd always gone down there and banged on his door and like, "Come on, let me in, we can sort this out," sort of thing, and I didn't want to leave him on his own. I was worried really about whether he might harm himself or how much he was going to drink and yeah, stuff like that. But the last time when he sent that text message and said he was done, I just wrote back, "Okay," because I was actually done as well. So that was the end of it. We're still friends now, like there's no issues there at all. And I think he's been off the drink for a little while, and his daughter's about to have a baby, so, he's going well. But that was when I found cards. So after that happened, I think the night I got that text message, I was actually sitting in front of my computer anyway. And I just went looking for personal development, yeah, and came across the Oracle card course. And it was funny because in my head, I was like, "I'm sure I've got a tarot deck somewhere in this house. Like, I vaguely remember buying one like 20 years ago or something and never did anything with it. So off I went scrounging around through all the boxes and cupboards and stuff. And oh yeah, sure enough, I did have a tarot deck somewhere. But I was super interested in the oracle cards, and I just thought, wow, this is just going to be so good. And I committed to the course, and I showed up every time and just learnt so much. And then it was when we went into the second part of that course, which was called Shared Wisdom. And I thought, oh, I've learnt so much. I definitely want to do the second part. So the Shared Wisdom part was when we were still learning oracle cards. But yeah, that was where we got put into the group. So the teacher of the class, what was her name again?
Colette Baron Reed.
Colette Baron Reed. So part of the course was that we had to learn to read for other people. And I was like, no, that's not happening. I can't possibly do that. I'd be too embarrassed. I don't know what I'm talking about. But it was part of the course. So we got thrown into this group. And I remember it started with emails. And so we didn't pick who we were going to be with. Colette did the picking. And she put the three of us together with Suzanne into a group. And I remember it started with email. Because the first thing we had to do was figure out the times. Because you were in Canada, I'm in Australia, and Suzanne was in New York. And it's like, well, what time are we going to, so that was the hardest part, I think, to start with. And then I was so determined, and having speaking to you guys, like I remember that you were really nervous as well, you said, to join that class. And anyway, we got on there and started reading cards for each other. And yeah, we've just never looked back. The growth from there has just been incredible, absolutely incredible in all of our lives.
In all of our lives. It was quite amazing recognizing. I remember because we had to start doing cards, and I had pulled for you that you had. Did I know you had a baby before? But it was just so interesting. It was your life. The cards that I had is, you were in a relationship, then you weren't. You had a child. Like it was in. It was amazing to pull that and to connect. The other thing that I found that was really amazing about it was the vulnerability and yet absolute care that comes with pulling and reading for another person. So the cards don't lie. The cards see what's happening. And I remember being quite disconcerted by that in many ways because, I'm like, oh, everything's okay. Life is okay. And I was in the middle of blending teenagers, and there's challenges with teenagers and blending them, and just life struggling at that time. And I would come in going, yeah, smile. And then the would come out. And it would be like, actually, these are some of the areas you're not being truthful with yourself. And it was that piece of you're not being truthful with your own heart, your own soul. So what it really helped me to recognize is that sense of my own energy. So really understanding and taking ownership of my own energy and trusting it, trusting my intuition. And it started with, okay, if I could read for you, I can start to read for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the truth that comes out in those cards is incredible. And even the understanding of where does that come from? Like that connection to the universe. That was a whole, I'm a very practical Virgo sort of person, and for me to go, well, hang on a minute, I can't see that. I can't, I don't understand that. Like, what do you mean we're all connected? Can't make shit up. We might not be able to explain it, but it is absolutely there. And then we started doing our readings for other people. Remember, we committed that we were going to do 100 readings
Yeah.
for other people before we actually sort of branched into having our own business and maybe doing this for real. None of us were very confident that we knew what we were talking about. But then we started doing the readings for other people, and it was fantastic. Like the feedback we got from that, and the tears and the revelations and the women that we were able to help just with those, all of us pulling cards, and we did it different ways. One of us would pull cards and one of us would talk about stuff, or we'd all pull, one card each, and then there was lots of different ways to do it. And in the background, we were sort of making up our business and a tarot life. We gave it a name and what our mission was, and we created a website and all that sort of stuff. And it was brilliant. But, you've got to be able to take those leaps. And for me, I think my psychic ability really surprised me. I know you guys used to say to me all the time, "Oh, just open your mouth, Charlene, and say what you've got to say because it's always right." Where does that come from? Well, I still can't even tell you that apart from, I believe it's true now. So, and look, my attitude towards my life and my attitude towards myself and the wanting to just be in joy all the time and not wanting to have shitty, bad energy around me. I let go of people that I never thought I'd be able to let go of, and I've never looked back. But it's just having that confidence in yourself, I think, to just keep taking those little steps forward.
Yes. So powerful. And for some
Mm,
people wondering, where is Suzanne now? About 3.5 years ago, we lost Suzanne to a heart attack. It was very sad for us.
yeah,
And her area of expertise was astrology. We all had areas, and yours is Moonology.
yeah,
You really and continue to love Moonology and go into it. So we shared that and we all learned it together in different ways. But
yeah,
just like anything, which modality spoke to you most easily, we kind of then took that on our own journeys. So even today, before we started, we just said, Suzanne, you're here with us. Just be
yeah,
with us, you beautiful soul sister, and you can feel her here.
yeah,
Like just feel her cheering us on. And I love the bit about it's through the spiritual journey of the cards. Whatever you call that. I came from a faith background. So is it God? Is it creator? Is it universe? Is it collective? In the end, it didn't matter because
no,
we were all connected and came from a complete different background.
yeah,
But all three of us shifted deeply in our own self-worth, our self-esteem, our belief in the world is here to help us and to teach us. And we shifted from that, it's happening to me, to it's happening for me. This idea of starting to be curious and to believe that we are here to learn and we are here to have a life that is filled with joy. And
yeah,
if you're
absolutely.
not in joy, whenever I say that, I always have to say, and if you're not in joy, it's an opportunity to learn. That's then your curriculum to learn.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's following those little steps of joy because once you start saying to yourself or to the universe, I want this to change. I want to be in joy. I don't want to be in this bad energy. I don't want to be sitting around crying at the grieving a family that I don't have anymore. It's like, well, what does bring me joy? It could be a nice glass of wine and some cheese. It could be having a bath. It could be going for a walk. It's the tiniest little things. I think for me, that was a big realization that it's not grand gestures. And I used to go for a lot of long walks back then out in the bush. Used to take my dogs, they're a bit old now, and I would just go and walk in nature on my own. And just the fact, and this is what we learnt out of shared wisdom and personal mastery as well. It's like notice the trees, notice the clouds. Instead of walking around with these blinkers on, look up or look at a tree or look at a flower and just notice. And it's amazing how those little sparks begin to be bigger sparks. And then we got into asking for signs. And mine has always been, I think yours is pennies, mine has always been feathers. Universe, if you're with me, I'm out walking, I'd love to see a feather. And I think when you came over, you made a comment to me about how many jars of feathers I have now because I get so many feathers from the universe. And it's bizarre how they'll show up. And I'm not always walking in nature now, but I actually had one literally blow into my workshop the other day in front of my office door. It was windy and I looked down and there was a white feather. And I'm like, well, how did that get in the workshop? And I'm like, well, of course it's universe just saying, hey, we're here. And can sound so unbelievable to a lot of people, but it's absolutely true. Once you start recognizing and allowing those things into your life, it just snowballs. It just gets bigger and bigger, and you'll see more and more of it. And that's the little, tiny little sparks along a path that lead you to more and more joy if you follow those little steps.
Yes. It's kind of like following the little breadcrumbs that are being left and just
Yeah.
continuing to be curious. And part of what we always did was we pulled cards before we got on together. So did you pull a card?
Yes, I did pull a card, and this one is from the deck that started the whole thing. So it's called, oh, you can't see, it's all blurry. It's called Wisdom of the Oracle by Colette Baron Reed. And when we started the personal mastery class, this was the deck that we had to get. I think I've got 4 of them because I wear them out. And it's a great little, it's a brilliant deck, it really is, because it does cover so many areas of your life that the answers to everything pretty much are in here for you. And the card that I pulled before we started, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. It's going to be blurry. Oh, there we go. It's called Yin. It's number 2 in the deck, and it's called Yin. And so the essential meaning of this, and it relates, we were talking before the class, it relates quite heavily to the moons and astrology at the moment. So Yin is really the feminine principle of receptivity. So it's about the allowing, which is what we're talking about. It's gathering information, it's taking in cues, and it's the conscious allowing of good things to come into our life. If we don't allow and we don't let them come in, then we can't change or we can't grow from that. So yeah, that's the card that I pulled, and I think that's quite appropriate. What did you get for today?
So I too am using a Colette Baron Reed deck. It's the spirit animal deck that she has, the pocket edition, and I have Bat Spirit. And Bat Spirit speaks about rebirth is assured.
Yeah.
So this rebirth, new things are coming. And your story speaks about that. No matter if you're being thrown out of a house, no matter if you're restarting with your family, someone's sending you a text, it is recognizing and believing that a rebirth is assured. So to follow the little breadcrumbs, follow those sparkles of light, follow what's coming and what is unfolding for you. I talk about tower moments because in tarot, there is the tower card. And for me, that card always happens because I know things should shift and I don't like shifting things. So sometimes the universe just goes, boom, we're going to shift it for you.
Yeah.
And it's only in hindsight when I look back, it was the best thing that happened in my life. I didn't know it, but it was so good for me. And this is the hope. This is the beacon. This is the target that rebirth is assured, knowing. So, right now, if you're listening to this and you're in the middle of that darkness and you're in the middle of the chaos of divorce, the chaos of restarting your life, the chaos of blending, know that it is assured that you are going to come into this new evolution of what your life is to be. So, follow the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, absolutely. And more importantly, and well, just as importantly, is want that for yourself.
Yes.
And things will be drawn to you, particularly now with the internet, as Michelle was saying, it gives you so much more opportunity. The algorithms on your Facebook page will start to change, the things that you start to look up or the things that get presented to you. And it could be a course, it could be a tribe, it could be a meeting, it could be a conversation that you overhear in a cafe. Start recognizing and looking out for those things, because you can bet your bottom dollar the universe is knocking on your door, and it doesn't stop knocking till it gets through. And it's funny, our lives are very similar, even though we're on other side of we have similar types of things that happen to us in business and in work and relationships, and we find very similar themes in our lives. And the universe, like I say, it'll just keep knocking until you open the door and say, "Yep, I'm ready. Let's begin."
I really agree. And we did the cards before, and we were talking a little bit about the Moonology that's coming up. And as we were just chatting about life and what's been going on, you said, Michelle, this fits exactly like what's happening in astrology. You can't make this shit up.
Oh, you can.
Tell us a little bit
No,
about it. What's happening in the moons? What's coming up?
yeah, well, it's interesting. So we've got another eclipse season coming up, and that's the time for people to do what we're saying, is to start opening up and believing. I've got this written down because there's a bit to go through. So talking about the moon energies and a little bit of astrology, and I don't want to make it sound too geeky, but you and I have always sort of paid attention to what's going on in the astrology. And when you're talking about new beginnings, I think one thing I want to say first is a lot of your listeners might not know anything about astrology or moons or whatever, but what I want to say is that if you actually start paying attention, just even a little bit, to the astrology or even just the moon phases, or what phase the moon is in, what sign it's in, what you'll actually find is it covers all the areas of your life. One will be about relationships, it might be about home or whatever, but it can help you mend all the areas as we go through life. So it's cycles. It's like menstrual cycles and the moon phases and the tides and the ebb and flow of the world and the energies in the world. And so what's happening at the moment that you might be able to relate to, and I'll let you answer some of these as well. So I want to go back a little bit because I want people to actually think about what's actually going on in their lives. So back in July 14, we had the new moon in Cancer. So as everyone knows, we have a new moon and a full moon every month, and we have, the quarters as well. And different things happen at the different times of the moon. And then the flavor of what's going on is our signs. So all of our astrological signs, and everybody knows what their sun sign is. And then you have a moon sign and a rising as well. It's a whole nother podcast. So we start off with the new moon in Cancer. And what the new moon in Cancer was asking us is about coming home to ourselves. So in that time, so if you want to think back, so Cancer is connected with home and family and belonging. And the new moon asks us to think less about what we want to achieve and more about how we actually want to feel, which is what we've just been talking about. How do we want to feel? We want to feel in joy, as we're talking about. And because we've had Mercury retrograde, and some of this will be a bit more than you sort of understand, but the Mercury retrograde in Cancer then actually slows things down. And so that gives us a really strong connection to our past. So how do we put that together? How do we want to feel? How have we felt in the past? And how do we want that to change? So that's the energy that we're dealing with at the moment. Cancer actually is very emotional as well. So it's a very emotional sign. So it's asking us to think about what from our past are we still carrying? And I'm sure a lot of your audience will have there'll be things in there, whether it's the relationship or the work or the whatever it is. What are you carrying from there that you probably don't need to carry? Another good question is, what does home actually mean to you now? Because if you've gone through divorce, not just physically are you in a different home, but what does home actually mean? Is home just your kids if you've got kids? Is home your pets or your dog? Is it your work? Is it that sort of thing? But what does it actually mean? And another good question is, what actually makes you feel safe now? So we're talking about how do we want to feel by asking these questions. And it's a really good idea to maybe pause the video or whatever and go and write some answers to that in a journal. And just only needs to be 1 or 2 lines. And then the other thing is, what do I need to do now that I didn't need to do, say, 5 or 10 years ago? What do you need to do now for your own self? So that's kind of the energy that's going on. And then on July 22nd, the sun actually moved into Leo. So the sun goes through all of the signs every year as well, all 12 signs. And again, it just adds a little flavor to the energy that's going on. So when the sun moves into Leo, if we go back, so Cancer's saying you want to come home to yourself, and Leo says, now show us who you are. So Leo's Leo the lion. Is very, out there. It's associated with confidence and creativity and leadership. So how confident are you? Leadership, passion, romance, fun. Where are those things in your life? And when the sun's shining light on there, it helps us to think about, well, where is the joy that we were talking about. So after the cancer actually helps us connect with what really matters emotionally, Leo then asks us, do we have the courage to live it? Can you actually live that? You've said this is what you want, but can you do it? Can you start following those breadcrumbs, and can you start really committing and saying, yes, this is what I want, instead of saying, oh, I could never have that. I'm never going to meet anyone else. I'm never have a good relationship. I'm never going to have any money. That's all got to go. Now we start to think, I could have that. And how are you going to help yourself to do that? So here's some questions for that. Where are you still making yourself smaller? Like, what are you doing that still makes you small? Are you waiting for permission from somebody, your ex or whatever, to move on with your life? We don't need their permission. Just go fucking do it, girl, if that's what you want to do. But these are the questions you need to ask yourself. Is there something you're good at that you've been hiding? Do you make yourself small and not? And I do it at work sometimes, like I'm like, even though I'm the boss, I sort of stand back a little bit and go, oh no, they can go and do that. Where do we do that? But the most important one I think out of this is what makes you feel alive. All right. So we're talking about what can I get rid of, and then what makes you feel alive? Where is the joy for you? How do you feel about those two sort of different types of energies, Michelle? Where's that come up for you lately?
It has, and this is where we talked, it really fits in what's happening in our lives right now. We're actually looking at shifting homes, changing homes, and holding some of the spaces for this. What about where we are and what we're doing is bringing us to a place of joy. And I know when I even go back and I think about doing that at different points throughout my divorce, when I was choosing to reclaim love for myself, one
Yep.
of the biggest thing was to put all the big rocks down that I knew were important. And I could write what I didn't want, but more importantly, I had to be able to say within a list what was important. What
Yeah.
is absolutely important in my life, in a partner, in a family? What do I need to make sure that I have? When I did that, I started to notice it coming in. And so it's this idea of when you start, even though your head's up to here, like you said, your body's buried in and you just don't feel like you can move. But as soon as you start to look and you're like, yeah, actually, this is happening and this is happening. And it might even be, for me, it was recognizing my boundaries and to stop people pleasing. Although I have to say, stop people pleasing it is an ongoing,
Work in progress.
yeah, it's an ongoing problem or issue that I need to work with.
Mm.
That continue. I get it in part of my life, and then I see it raise its beautiful head in another part of my life saying, "Oh, look, I'm over here." This same pattern. And as soon as I did that and I started owning my own worth, my own joy, and saying, "I am worthy of beautiful things happening to me." And that's what I wanted. So I had to let go. I had to let go of worry. It was like an anchor on my ankle, like just holding me back. I could feel it constricting. And I had to just say, that is the past. That's a shoulda, woulda, coulda. I cannot go back in time and change anything. So to spend any energy in the past, aside from gaining wisdom from it, does not help me.
No, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And look, and as adults, we can become really focused on productivity and responsibility. And sometimes what we forget is to simplify things because we enjoy them. And the Leo season really reminds us that joy has a lot of value in our lives. Like, to feel joy is very, very valuable. It has so many flow on effects, health wise, our mental stability, what we're attracting and drawing into ourselves. So, whilst it's good to be productive, joy is absolutely just as important.
One thing I have on my phone, my algorithm is babies. I
Oh, Lord.
a whole bunch of babies. I love pictures of babies and,
Yeah,
just the mothers cooing with babies and baby giggles. So my algorithm is just filled with babies because it brings me joy.
joy.
I smile no matter what's happening in my day. This
Yeah,
giggle of a baby just makes you smile and you
yeah.
just recognize the preciousness of this life.
Yeah, and you can't underestimate the chemical reactions that go on in your body when you're smiling and laughing. The hits of dopamine and all sorts of things that go on, like, you can't undervalue that at all. It makes such a difference to your life. Yeah, you're right. I think mine's probably dogs. I think I have dogs and cats coming up on mine all the time, but besides all the business stuff. But, yeah, look, and there's nothing wrong with actually just sitting down and doom scrolling for a little while and having a laugh at a few jokes or, like you say, babies, it brings you joy and it's actually really good for you. So the next thing, I'll go on to the next one. So July 30 brings us a full moon in Aquarius. So here we go with a different energy. So Leo's about the individual. This is me. This is what I have. Aquarius is all about now friendships, community groups, and the collective. Okay. So this full moon coming up on July 30 is where do I belong without losing myself? And I think that's an important part. So it's like, where do you fit into a group or whatever where you don't get lost? And sometimes this can actually come up with as you're talking about, the people pleasing things. So where you got to find where you belong, but you don't get lost in that, somewhere that you can still thrive. So we all want to belong somewhere, but like I say, sometimes we make ourselves smaller to fit into that friendship group. And this is what this full moon in Aquarius is going to illuminate, is where that's happening. So you might realize that you've outgrown a friendship or a group, or you might realize how important some other people have become to you. So it's not necessarily about cutting people out of your life. It's about noticing whether the relationships that you've currently got allow you to grow. So if they're not allowing you to grow or they're making you small, this is what the full moon in Aquarius is going to start illuminating. So don't be surprised if things come up where you might have a little tip with somebody, or, you might be in your local volunteer group and you might be feeling a bit off about somebody else is in the groups. Aquarius also rules the future. So it's talking about, this is a really great time for us to think about where you're actually heading as part of those groups. So if you could look 12 months ahead, what would you genuinely like your life to look like? Not what should it look like, but what do you want, as we said before. So this full moon is actually helping us to keep on moving in the direction. And what I was saying before about the flavors and how the phases go, this is what they do. That's why I started back here, because each month the energies build on the month before. So it'll say, okay, I want you to have a look at this. Okay, we've looked at that now and these are the changes. How are you going to live with that? And now we're saying, all right, what's in the future for you? What do you want to come into? And that's a really interesting question right now, because we're coming into the eclipse season. So how do you feel about the full moon in Aquarius? Where do you see where do you belong, do you think, without losing yourself?
Well, and what I find is eclipse seasons are karmic. Don't you find
Mm,
that?
yeah.
They have been karmic, and it can be, 2, 3 weeks before and after the eclipse season. And it's afterwards I've really understood some different things that have occurred in my life. Where is the eclipse season this time?
So the eclipse energy just that we've got coming up. So usually we describe them as like turning points, or I like to call them portals. So these are eclipses are when we can walk through the doors into another area or another energy in our life. So sometimes we can consciously walk through the portal and say, this is where I really want to go. But what we mostly find with eclipses is we're getting pushed through the portal. So get ready. there's usually some sort of shift that comes, as you say, and you might not notice it straight away, but you'll see it later. So a solar eclipse happens at the new moon. And so astrologically, that's associated with amplified beginnings. Big new things happen, big chapters, big redirections, okay? And then the lunar eclipse happens at the full moon, and that's more associated with the culmination or the revelation or letting go, okay? So how does that, we might not always understand what's happening when it's happening at the time, but like we said, sometimes you've got to look back. So rather than trying to have control over the energy, you just want to pay attention. So this is a time to just have our eyes open and recognize and write in our journals, because there'll be things that happen that won't actually make sense to you, like you said, for a couple of weeks down the track. So just pay attention to what's changing, what's coming into your life, what's leaving. Is there people leaving? And what are you seeing that's maybe a little bit different now? So our first eclipse is August 12th. So it's not too far away. And that's a new moon solar eclipse, and it's in the sign of Leo. So if we had to reduce this down to one question for this energy, it would be, who are you ready to become?
That is such a powerful question, because it really comes and from the thread of everything else we've talked about. Because in this eclipse season, it's saying you've been doing the journaling, you've been doing the thinking, and now who is it you want to become? You're writing down your own big rocks for yourself, your heart, your soul, and your life, and the people in it. Very powerful.
Yes. Yeah, and you can start that now. What do you want? And don't be scared to want, because the wanting is what brings it to you. So with Leo, we've got the new moon in Leo. So it's connected with your own identity, confidence, creativity, the joy, and also of being seen. So it's going to open a new chapter around one of those themes. So there might be something that you've wanted to create that'll come in. Maybe you're ready to take on a leadership role, or perhaps you've spent years worrying about what everyone else thinks and you don't need to do that anymore. Or maybe you've disconnected from part of yourself that you really feel passionate and alive about, and maybe you need to bring that back into your life. It could be a hobby or a craft or walking or whatever it is that you like to do. It's about doing that. And so the eclipse is saying, what are you ready to become? But also, what happens to you if you stop hiding? So what would really happen if you actually, went out into the world and showed everybody things? So confidence isn't necessarily believing that everyone's going to approve of everything you do. Confidence really can be just simply as saying that you're going to be okay even if they don't.
Very powerful.
Yeah, that's confidence. Confidence means, well, I don't care if you don't like what I think or what I say or whatever. This is me. And it's about being true to yourself. So think about where you've been waiting for permission. So it might be permission to change, or permission to create something or leave something. Maybe the person whose permission you've actually been waiting for is yourself. Give yourself the opportunity that you need to. And just remember that eclipse stories unfold over time, as we've said. So something doesn't necessarily actually have to happen on August 12. It might be a conversation, an idea, a meeting. But 6 months later, you could look back and think, hey, that's where it all started.
Yes. And then it's 2 weeks, and then we get the full moon again. And there's now the lunar eclipse there.
Exactly, yeah. So we only have to wait until August 28 to get our full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces. So again, here we go with a different energy. So as I said, we had the new moon is beginnings, right? Things are changing. What do we want to be? What do we want to become? What are we going to move into? Who do we want to become? As we said, is the question. And then when we get to the full moon, so you've got 2 weeks in that energy, and then we get to the full moon, and then we go, okay, what's all the things I need to let go of for this thing to come along with me? So the other side of the portal is the energy changing. So Leo says, what do you want to become? Pisces says, now you need to surrender. Now you have to allow yourself to do the becoming.
That is the hardest part for me, is the surrender and the becoming. I can do all of the planning, I do all of that, and then I wanna control it. I wanna
Yeah.
control. And the greatest learning in the last 20 years of my life has been releasing control and surrendering and that trust, that rest assured it is all going to work out. Surrender into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. It's the hardest part for a lot of people to actually have the confidence in yourself to just surrender. It was one of the hardest things that I learned. I didn't believe it was possible. And then slowly but surely, one little thing happened, another little thing happened. And I'm like, well, I don't have to worry about this anymore. How crazy is that? I can literally let that go. And now worry is one of the things that I absolutely do the least. Even though I own a business and I've got all the staffing issues and cash flow issues and whatever, I do not worry. I never bring it home with me. And worry is one thing that I just don't do. So, anyway, let's get back. So, talking about Pisces, right? We're talking about surrender here. So, Pisces is the final sign of the zodiac as well, right? So, we're right at the end now, and it's associated with our intuition and our spirituality, compassion, our dreams, and also of letting go. So this is going to be the best time. You've done the work back here. You've figured out what you want to become, and now you're going to let it come to you, right? So after Leo, who asks, who are we becoming? Pisces then says to us, what do I need to release in order to become that person? So here's the brave part. So it could be things like resentment. Is it guilt? Is it an old relationship? Is it an identity that you've outgrown? Is it something that you wish had happened differently? Perhaps you're trying to control something that simply isn't yours to control, Michelle, who loves to control everything. Pisces reminds us that sometimes healing isn't about fixing the past, like you just said, right? It's not about the past. It's about accepting what happened and deciding we're not carrying that forward. We accept it. It happened. We leave it there. And it's not easy for people going through divorce and all the bullshit that brings up. It's so hard, but it's one of the most important and best things that you can do for yourself as a human is let it go. Like you say, you can't change it. So here we also want to pay attention to dreams, to feelings, and those little quiet inner nudges. So if you're not already, maybe you might not be meditating, but you might be walking, let your mind go a little bit. Try not to focus on the bullshit. And we used to call it, well, we still call it stinking thinking. Get out of the stinking thinking. If you feel like your mind is carrying on about, oh, that bastard, he said this and he said that, try and turn it off and say to yourself, oh, look at that tree over there. What sort of tree is that? Is that an elm? I wonder if it'll lose its. You're in control of your thoughts. And a lot of people forget about that. And that your ego just wants to be in that old, oh, we have to do this, we have to do that, yada, yada, yada. Get out of the sinking thinking. So, pay attention to those dreams and things. But Pisces is also going to remind us that we need to have our boundaries. Now, why do we need boundaries? You think, is that a negative thing to have? Boundaries are so necessary for us to become who we want to become. We have to get out of the people pleasing. Don't forget, there's a difference between intuition and fear, and there's also a difference between surrender and avoidance. So it's not about just avoiding, it's about that surrender as well. It's also powerful for forgiveness too. Eclipses are really good for forgiveness. And I guess mainly for forgiving ourselves. We talk about not getting caught up in the bullshit of the past and letting that go. And we have to forgive ourselves. If we fucked it up, just let it go. You didn't mean to. Maybe you said the wrong thing. You snapped somebody's head off. You called him a dickhead, whatever. You've just got to go, probably wasn't my finest hour. However, I'm moving on in this direction. So it doesn't mean to say that it was okay. It just means that you're not carrying that forward. So the final point for this is I'm not allowing this experience to take up this much space inside me anymore.
That is such a beautiful way to end this session and to really bring our listeners to a point of understanding the stories of our lives and our path in spirituality and how following the moon phases can guide you in these difficult times, in great times, and to really lean in and start to understand either by coming back to the podcast, because you're going to come back on and tell us more about
Yeah.
um,
Would tell us more.
Moonology.
Yeah.
How would you like to finish today?
I think the final thing is just talking about what can we look forward to in the next month. So we've talked about where we've come from and what does all this becoming mean. So I think the things we want to pay attention to, and you can jot these ones down, is to notice what's changing. So what sort of things do you see? Because the universe will start putting little things in here and there. Notice what is you're becoming excited about. So look at the things that bring you joy, the babies on Facebook or the puppies down the street that you see, whatever it is. Just notice when you go, oh, that makes me feel good. Or notice when you've smiled. What was it that actually made you smile? So notice what you're becoming excited about. And also notice what you're increasingly not prepared to tolerate anymore. Okay, so what are the things that you just go, yeah, do you know what? I don't want to sit in the tea room with that girl anymore because all she does is bitch about her boyfriend. Go for a walk. So notice what you're unwilling to tolerate, because that'll give you some hints about the things that you need to move out of your life. Notice the people that energize you. So coming back to that smiling, who makes you feel joy? Who do you love being around? It could be, a movie star. It could be somebody on Facebook that has funny reels or TikTok or whatever. If they make you laugh and they make you smile, just notice who are those types of people, because the people that energize you, that's your tribe. They're the ones that you want to be drawn to or that you want to have drawn to them. And then notice anything that keeps coming back into your awareness, especially during eclipse season. As we said, we don't always immediately understand why something's changing. And the final thing that I want to say to sort of wrap all of this up, and I want you to write this down somewhere, is I want you to be brave enough to begin, wise enough to release, and open enough to see where the journey is going to take you.
Thank you so much, Sharlene.
No problem.
Thank you so much. And for the listeners, keep leading with your soul. And until next time.
Bye.
Thank you for being here today. If something in this episode landed for you, trust that. It found you for a reason. If today's episode moved something in you, share it with a woman who needs to hear it. That is how we find each other. You can connect with me on my website, michellewright.co, and on Instagram at michellewright.co. And if you're ready to go deeper, a free connection call is the first step. Because this is not happening to you, it is happening for you. Until next time.